At our 10-year family reunion, my brother introduced himself as the new owner of the city's biggest tech firm. Mom boasted, "Unlike you, he actually became someone." Dad told me to leave before I embarrassed them. I pulled out my phone and pressed one button. His security badge turned red and the building went into lockdown. I said, "Get the imposter out of my office." My name is Maya Calloway. I am 36 years old. I teach coding fundamentals at an elementary school 2 mornings a week, in a classroom with alphabet charts on the walls and small chairs that were not designed for adults. I drive a 7-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper that I have been meaning to fix since last winter and have not gotten around to, partly because I am busy, and partly because the dent has become a kind of landmark at this point, a thing that belongs to the car the way a scar belongs to a person. I own one good coat. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building 6 blocks from the office, and most mornings I am at my desk before 6, with a cup of coffee and a worn green notebook that has been with me since I was 24 years old, working through whatever the previous day left unresolved. This is my life. It is a fine life. It is, in fact, a life that I am genuinely proud of, which I mention not as a defense, but as a fact that you need to hold in mind when I tell you what happened at my family's 10-year reunion in June. Because without that fact, the rest of the story does not make sense in the way I need it to make sense. My brother Derek stood in my parents' backyard on a Saturday afternoon in front of 43 members of our extended family and announced to anyone who would listen that he was the new owner of Callaway Systems. Callaway Systems is the largest technology firm in our city. It employs 230 people. It has 2 offices, and a third is under construction. It carries my last name on the front of the building in brushed steel letters that I stood in the lobby and looked at for a long time the day they went up, thinking about the 7-year-old on the kitchen floor with the broken clock radio, thinking about all the years between that kitchen floor and that lobby, thinking that the name looked right. I founded Callaway Systems when I was 24 years old. I have run it for 12 years. Derek had been employed there as a mid-level sales associate for 11 weeks when he stood in that backyard and told our family he owned it. My mother turned to me after Derek made his announcement, in front of those same 43 people, and said, "Unlike you, he actually became someone." My father appeared at my elbow 10 seconds later and quietly suggested I leave before I embarrassed them. I did not leave. I reached into my jacket pocket, took out my phone, opened one application, and pressed one button. 12 seconds, from the moment my hand went into my pocket to the moment I put the phone back. Across the city, in the glass building with my name above the entrance, every access terminal registered a security update. My brother's employee badge, Level 3 Sales Associate, ID number 4471, turned red. Floors 4 through 7 entered soft lockdown mode. The front desk received an automated notification. The security team on the ground floor received a separate one. Standard procedure for a suspended badge at senior override level. Hold, flag, and await instruction from the authorizing level. The authorizing level was me. The authorizing level has always been me. His smartwatch buzzed. I watched it happen from 30 feet away. I watched him look down at his wrist with the mild, distracted expression of someone expecting a calendar reminder. I watched that expression change into something I had never seen on his face before. Something searching. Something without a script. He looked up. I was already looking at him. I said it quietly. The kind of quiet that carries exactly as far as it needs to and no farther. The 2 nearest tables heard me clearly. Aunt Carol heard me. Derek heard me with absolute precision. Someone should probably get the imposter out of my office. Before I tell you everything that happened next, and before I tell you everything that happened before, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe if this story earns it. Drop your location and your local time in the comments below. I always want to know where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. Now let me take you back to where this actually begins. Not the backyard in June. Much further back than that. Back to a beige 2-story house on a street called Delwood Drive, and a family that taught 2 children 2 entirely different lessons about what it meant to be worth something. I grew up in a beige 2-story house on Delwood Drive in the kind of neighborhood where everyone mows their lawn on Saturday morning and puts Christmas lights up the weekend after Thanksgiving. The kind of neighborhood where the driveways are clean and the mailboxes are painted and there is always someone somewhere with a leaf blower. It was a fine neighborhood. It was a fine house. A house with a living room and a dining room and a kitchen that smelled like whatever my mother was cooking, which was usually something good, and bedrooms that were adequate and a yard that was ordinary. There is nothing wrong with any of it. I want to be clear about that. The house was not the problem. The house was just a container. What I am going to tell you about is what lived inside it. My brother Derek is 2 years older than me. He was the kind of child that certain kinds of neighborhoods seem specifically designed to produce. Tall for his age, loud in the affectionate way that adults find charming, athletic in the specific way that opens doors in American life from the moment you are old enough to throw a ball straight. He played quarterback at Millbrook High. He was homecoming court 2 years running. He could walk into any room of strangers and leave it 20 minutes later with 3 new friends, a standing invitation to someone's barbecue, and a working knowledge of everyone's children's names. People gravitated toward him with the natural, unthinking ease of people gravitating toward warmth and light. I observed this my entire childhood without resentment and without any particular confusion. Some people are simply built for rooms. Derek was built for rooms. I was built for something else. What I was, from as early as I have any memory of myself at all, was intensely curious about how things worked. Not people, not rooms, systems, structures, the invisible logic underneath the surface of things. I was the child who needed to understand why the light turned on before I was satisfied with the fact that it did. My father gave me a broken clock radio when I was 7 years old, intending to put it in the trash on his way to the garage. I intercepted it. I spent 4 days on the kitchen floor taking it apart piece by piece, drawing diagrams of each component in a spiral notebook and reassembling it in the reverse order until it worked. When I turned it on and the morning radio came out of it, I felt something that I did not have words for at 7 and now recognize as the specific satisfaction of understanding a system completely enough to restore it. I have been chasing that feeling for 29 years. It is the reason Callaway Systems exists. My father stood in the kitchen doorway and watched me put the last piece back. His face had an expression I could not fully read at 7 and can read much more clearly now. Genuine pride combined with genuine bewilderment. The expression of a man who has produced something he does not have a category for and is unsure whether to be pleased or unsettled. He was more comfortable with Derek's touchdowns. Those he understood completely. He knew exactly what to say about those, how to hold them, how to present them at a barbecue. The clock radio was more difficult. He never quite found the words for it. And I think, in some fundamental way that shaped everything that followed, he never really stopped trying. My mother Sandra was a different kind of presence, warmer than my father in most ways and sharper in one specific and consequential way. She had a vision of what a successful and admirable life looked like, and the vision was precise, and it was unwavering, and she was not shy about measuring her children against it. For Derek, the vision always seemed achievable, always seemed like something he was moving toward on a recognizable trajectory. For me, it seemed like a picture I was supposed to want to be in, a room I was supposed to want to enter, but every time I looked for myself in it, I was standing just outside the frame, on the wrong side of the glass, looking at a life that had been designed for someone with a different shape. She said things over the years, small things, mostly, the kind that do not announce themselves as wounds in the moment they are delivered, but accumulate with a patience that is remarkable in retrospect. Water in a basement. You do not notice it until you are standing in it, she said, at the dinner table the night I won the regional science fair at 11 years old, while the ribbon was still in my hand. That's wonderful, Maya, but you should really try to be more social. Science fairs are not going to teach you how to talk to people. I nodded and ate my dinner and thought about the project I was already planning for next year. She said when I was 16 and told her I wanted to study computer science in college, I just worry that you're going to close yourself off from everything that actually matters. Computers are fine, Maya, but computers don't love you back. I told her I understood and went back to my room and opened my laptop and kept working. She said, at the dinner after my college graduation, while the cord from my summa cum laude honors was still draped over my gown and the commencement program was still on the table, Derek just got a new car. A Lexus. Have you seen it? He looked so handsome, picking me up from the airport. I said I had not seen it yet and asked if she wanted more water. She called my teaching at the elementary school playing school at a Thanksgiving table in front of the whole family 6 years ago, when I had already been running Callaway Systems for 6 years and had 60 employees. I did not correct her. I ate my cranberry sauce and thought about a product architecture problem I was working through and made a note on my phone under the table. I tell you all of this not to build a case against my mother. I tell it because you need to understand the atmosphere, the specific weather of that house, the particular temperature that settles into you when the people who are supposed to see you first and most clearly keep looking just slightly past you toward someone who is easier to recognize. You need to feel the weight of it before the backyard makes sense. Because the backyard was not an isolated event, the backyard was the end of a sentence that had been building for 36 years. The last person I need to tell you about from my childhood is my Aunt Carol. She is my father's younger sister, and she is the person in my family who I believe saved something essential in me. Not dramatically, and not all at once, but steadily over the years, in the way that certain kinds of attention save things. She is the only member of my immediate family who attended my regional science fair. She drove 3 hours round trip to sit in my college graduation bleachers with a handmade sign that said Maya in large block letters with a small hand-drawn star in each corner. She sent cards on my birthday that referenced specific things I had told her I was working on the last time we spoke. She never asked me to be louder, or warmer, or more like Derek. She never suggested that the way I moved through the world was a problem that needed correcting. She asked me, every single time we spoke, what I was building. That was always her word for it. Not working on, not doing, not studying, building. What are you building, Maya? And I always had an answer. I always had a complete and detailed and enthusiastic answer, and she always listened to all of it. And that is a thing I have never taken for granted. I graduated at 21 with a computer science degree, a minor in applied mathematics, and 3 job offers on the table before I walked across the stage. I took the smallest one. It was at a boutique software consultancy downtown, 24 employees, specialized in supply chain and operations technology. The other 2 offers were at large firms where I would have been one of hundreds of new analysts, assigned to a team, assigned to a project, assigned to a category. I had already started to understand, in a way I could not yet fully articulate, that what I was actually trying to do had no category yet. I needed to learn the landscape first, from the inside, at a small enough scale that I could see all of it. I spent 3 years at that consultancy learning everything I could absorb about how organizations scaled and where they broke, about the specific seams where technology and operations failed to talk to each other, the predictable places where things that worked at 20 employees stopped working at 50, and the reasons why. I was not the social center of that office. I was not the one who organized Friday drinks or knew everyone's birthday. I was the one who stayed until 10 on a Tuesday because I had identified a flaw in a client's system and I needed to understand it completely before I allowed myself to stop. My colleagues liked me well enough. They also knew, without ever discussing it, that I was building towards something that was not going to fit inside what we were all doing there together. I think some of them could feel it before I had found the words for it myself. At 24, I left. I had $8,000 saved, a worn green notebook full of 2 years of ideas and sketches and questions, and a small rented desk on the 3rd floor of a shared workspace downtown in a building that smelled like aging carpet, and the particular ambition of people who have not yet failed enough times to be fully afraid of it. I named the company Callaway Systems. I kept the family name not out of sentiment, and not because I had resolved my complicated feelings about what that name had meant to me in that house on Delwood Drive. I kept it because it was already on the company before I reached a decision point about it, and I decided that moving it backward, changing it, making it smaller or different because of the associations it carried for me, would be a form of allowing those associations to win. The name was mine as much as it was anyone else's. I was going to build something inside it that would be entirely my own, and I was not going to ask anyone's permission to use my own last name. The first year was functional, lean and careful and focused. I had 2 clients and no employees. I worked from the shared desk 7 days a week and slept 6 hours a night, and learned more in those 12 months than in the previous 3 years combined. Because failure teaches faster than instruction, and I made enough small failures in year 1 to build a very solid education. Year 2 was the year things started to feel like something real. I hired my first employee, a developer named James who has worked with me ever since and who remains 12 years later one of the people I trust most. I brought on a second client, larger than the first. I moved to a slightly larger desk. The green notebook filled up, and I started a second one, though I still kept the first. Year 3 nearly destroyed everything. I lost my 2 largest clients within 6 weeks of each other. One was acquired by a competitor who brought their own vendor relationships with them. The other dissolved internally in a way that had nothing at all to do with the quality of my work, but took a substantial portion of my operating revenue with it regardless. I had 7 employees by then. 7 people who came through the door every morning and put on their headphones and opened their laptops based on the belief that I knew what I was doing and that the thing I was building was real. That belief was not misplaced. But I had 4 months in year 3 when the evidence for it was thin enough that I could not have blamed any of them for questioning it. I spent those 4 months sleeping 4 hours a night, eating whatever was in reach, rebuilding the company's entire service model from the foundation, while simultaneously pitching to anyone who would agree to meet me. I drove to 3 separate pitch meetings in a single day more than once, heard no in each of them, drove home, opened the green notebook, and kept working. I did not allow myself to think about the alternative to keeping working because the alternative had no useful information in it. I only thought about the problem directly in front of me, and then the one after that. Aunt Carol sent a check during those 4 months. The amount was modest. The note inside was not. It said, "Don't let them make you small." I read it standing at my kitchen counter at 11:30 at night with the accounting spreadsheet still open on my laptop behind me. I folded the note and put it in the back of the green notebook where it has been ever since. The check I used to cover 1 additional week of payroll, which gave me enough time to close the contract that kept us alive. Year 4 was rebuilding. Year 5 was evidence that the rebuild had worked. Year 7, 40 employees, 3 enterprise clients, operations in 4 states. Year 10, 230 people, 2 offices, a third under construction. A name on a building in brushed steel that I stood in front of one morning before anyone else arrived and allowed myself, for exactly 1 minute, to fully see. I still live in the 1-bedroom apartment. I still drive the dented Honda. I still teach at the elementary school 2 mornings a week because I started doing it 6 years ago and I have not been able to stop. Because there is a specific thing that happens when a child understands, for the first time, that they can make a machine do something it has never done before. And that specific thing is something I need to be in the room for. I have never been able to explain it in a way that satisfies people who want a more strategic reason. It is not strategic. It is just true. My family knew I worked in technology. That is the complete and accurate summary of what they knew. Not because I hid things from them deliberately, because I had spent enough years bringing things to that door and watching them get redirected toward my brother's latest achievement that I had gradually stopped presenting at that particular entrance. I found other doors. I kept building. We all got along fine with the arrangement until the Saturday afternoon in June, when the arrangement ran out of room. This section requires me to be precise, because the details matter and because I want to be accurate about my brother, not generous and not unkind, just accurate. Derek is not a stupid man. He is not a bad man. He is a man who was shaped by the same house I grew up in and drew a different lesson from it, which I think is worth understanding because it explains everything that happened in that backyard, without excusing any of it. The lesson that house taught me was, build something real in private, and do not wait for permission from anyone. The lesson it taught Derek was, perform confidence, be visible, be impressive, and the details will sort themselves out because they always have. For 38 years, that lesson served him adequately enough that he never had serious cause to revise it. He is genuinely skilled at sales. He can read a room, sustain a conversation, and close a deal with the natural ease of a man who has never had reason to doubt his own appeal. I did not choose to hire him. He applied through our standard portal and was hired on his qualifications, which were real, by a sales team that had no reason to know who he was to me. His last name matched the company name. Our HR system flagged the potential conflict automatically, which is what it is designed to do, and then cleared it because a search of available records showed no familial connection. Calloway is not an uncommon name. The overlap looked coincidental because from the outside it genuinely was coincidental. He came in, interviewed, demonstrated that he could sell, and was offered the position. The process was clean. There is nothing to criticize in it. I found out he worked for me on his third day. Priya, my COO, pulled his file and brought it to me. She said, "I think this is your brother." I looked at the file for a long time. I looked at his photo, which confirmed it, and at his employment history, which showed he was qualified for the role, and at his new hire paperwork, which was complete and in order. I said, "Let it run. If he's good enough to be here, he can be here." That was the complete extent of my involvement in his employment for 11 weeks. I learned through Aunt Carol after the reunion that Derek had begun telling family members approximately 1 month into his employment that he was basically running things at Calloway Systems. The story had grown. It had the specific growth pattern of a story that starts as mild inflation and escalates because the inflation is never challenged and the audience keeps responding positively and there is no structural reason to stop. By the time the family reunion arrived, he had told enough people enough versions that the largest version had become necessary. He had built a corner, the way people sometimes build corners for themselves when the story they are performing outgrows the facts it was built on. He introduced himself to our extended family as the new owner. He stood up straight and said it clearly, and the table responded with the impressed quiet that the table would respond with if it were true. And I think in that moment Derek experienced something very close to believing it was. I want to pause here for a moment. If you are watching this, and someone in your life has ever taken credit for what you built, or positioned themselves inside a story about your work in a way that removed you from it entirely, I want you to know that I understand that specific feeling precisely. It does not feel like ordinary anger. It is quieter than anger. It is more like watching something happen in a room through glass, unable to fully enter the room and address it directly, because the room belongs to a story that was told before you arrived. If that is resonating with you, let me know in the comments. Stay with me. What happened next in that backyard is something I have thought about every day since, and I want to tell it completely. The Calloway family holds a reunion every 10 years. My grandmother, on my father's side, started the tradition in 1984, and it has continued with the kind of obligatory momentum that family traditions develop when they are old enough that stopping would require a deliberate decision, and no one wants to be the person who made that decision. The 10-year interval means people arrive notably different from the previous time. Children have become adults. Adults have aged. Marriages have formed and sometimes ended. Careers have changed. Everyone arrives carrying a decade of their life, and for a Saturday afternoon, you lay it all out on folding tables in a backyard and compare it to what everyone else has been carrying, which is the uncomfortable and occasionally revelatory exercise that family reunions actually are, beneath the casseroles and the lawn chairs. I almost did not go. I had a long-standing calibration about family gatherings. I attended the things that mattered to Aunt Carol. I kept my appearances brief and my updates minimal, and I preserved my energy for the work. The reunion was exactly the kind of event my calibration recommended declining. I knew how my mother's voice would sound performing for a large audience. I knew the specific conversational patterns the afternoon would follow. I knew where I would be positioned in the story that would be told, and it was not a position I found useful to occupy. My calibration said, decline, send a card, call Carol afterward. But Carol called me on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks before the date. She said, "Maya, come. Not for the whole thing. Not for them. Come because I want to sit in a lawn chair next to you for a few hours and ask you what you've been building and hear the whole answer." I said I would be there. I arrived at 11 in the morning, an hour early. I brought a casserole dish because that is the grammar of these gatherings, and I wanted to be useful before the other things started. My mother was in the kitchen arranging platters. She looked up when I came in and said, "Oh, you made it," in the tone she uses for mild surprise, tinged with mild disappointment. It is a tone I have heard my entire life and can recognize from a single syllable at this point. I hugged her, set the casserole on the counter, and went outside to find Carol. Carol was under the oak tree in the back corner of the yard in a yellow dress with a glass of iced tea balanced on the armrest of her lawn chair. She stood and held me for a long time when she saw me coming across the grass. She smelled like the lavender soap she has always used, the same she has used for as long as I can remember, and that smell is so thoroughly associated in my memory with being seen that it does something involuntary in my chest every time I encounter it. We sat together for nearly an hour. We talked about her garden, which she is very serious about. We talked about a road trip she had taken in April through the Blue Ridge Parkway. She asked what I was building, and I told her about the third office, and she listened to all of it and nodded in the particular way she has, as though the information confirms something she already knew. The yard filled up over the following 2 hours. Extended family arrived in waves. First cousins and second cousins, a great uncle who had been driven 4 hours from a retirement community to be here, aunts and uncles whose names I had to locate before speaking to them. My father moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and laughing with the full-body openness he reserved for audiences. He found me once and hugged me and said he was glad I made it, and then moved toward the next person with the forward momentum of a man who had a whole yard to work. The food was good. The afternoon was warm without being oppressive. Someone had strung lights between the fence posts, even though it was a daytime event. A cluster of younger cousins were running a complicated game in the far corner of the yard, involving a ball and rules that no adult had been able to decode. It was, in most observable ways, a pleasant afternoon. I ate food and spoke to cousins I genuinely liked and had not seen in a decade, and thought more than once that coming had been the right decision and that Carol had been right to ask me. Derek arrived at 1 o'clock. He arrived with the presents that Derek always arrived with, slightly late enough to constitute an entrance, in clothes that announced their cost without being loud about it, with a watch I did not recognize but that had the particular quality of things purchased to be noticed. He moved through the family with the fluid, practiced ease of someone who has spent his entire adult life being the most engaging person in any gathering he attended. He moved from table to table and from group to group with the natural rhythm of a current moving through water, and people lit up when he reached them, the way they always had, the way they always would. He was good at this. He had always been spectacularly good at this. Carol had stopped talking. She was watching Derek work the yard from beside me with an expression I could not fully read. Not angry, not disapproving. Something more like a person watching a film they have already seen and waiting for the part they know is coming. And I heard it from across the yard. My father's cousin Gerald, a man whose entire conversational range across 35 years of family gatherings had been the specifics of his golf handicap and the unreliability of his lawnmower, asked Derek how things were going at work. Derek set his drink down. He straightened slightly. He had the expression of a man who has been waiting, specifically and patiently, for exactly this question. "Actually," he said, at a volume calibrated to carry, "I've got some news. You know Callaway Systems? The big tech company downtown? I'm the new owner." The table went quiet in the way that tables go quiet when someone says something that sounds impressive but is slightly too large to immediately fit inside a single moment. Gerald said, "Seriously? That company is massive." Derek nodded with the casual certainty of a man confirming something obvious. "Yeah, it's been a process. But, yeah, I run it now." My mother was standing 3 feet from that table. She turned toward the larger group with the expression she had always worn for Derek's greatest achievements. The expression of a woman whose investment in her son's success has finally produced a return she can present to everyone at once. Her voice carried in the particular way that voices carry when they are intended to carry. "Unlike you," she said, and she was looking directly at me when she said it. "He actually became someone." The yard went partially silent. Not completely, the way yards go when something dramatic happens, but partially, the way they go when something lands near enough to people that they hear it and register it and do not know immediately where to put it. A child's game continued in the far corner. Someone's phone played 2 seconds of a song before being silenced. The ordinary, continuous world kept moving around the edges of the thing that had just been said. I stood very still. I was holding a paper plate. I looked at my mother. My father appeared at my elbow. He had the particular teleporting quality that parents develop when they have spent a lifetime managing the tension between their children, arriving exactly at the moment when their presence becomes relevant. He put his hand on my arm with the lightness of a suggestion rather than a restraint. He said, low enough for only me, "Maya, maybe you should head out before." He did not finish the sentence. He had never needed to finish it. Before you embarrass us, before you make this into something, before whatever is happening on your face right now becomes a problem for the version of this afternoon we have all been maintaining. I looked at my father for a moment, then at my mother, who was still in the position she had been in when she said what she said, with the expression still on her face. Then at Derek, who was already laughing at something someone had said at the table, already past the moment, already comfortably elsewhere in the specific way that people are elsewhere when they have never had to remain inside the full weight of what they have said. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out my phone. The Callaway Systems Security Administration application is not something I open frequently. It is not part of my daily workflow. It exists for a specific category of situation, and that Saturday afternoon in June was the first time I had opened it from a location other than my office. I navigated to Employee Access Management. I entered the badge number. I found the red suspension toggle. I pressed it. I pressed confirm. The whole process took approximately 12 seconds. Across the city, in the glass building with my name above the entrance, the system processed the update instantly. Badge 4471, suspended, pending review. Every access terminal on floors 4 through 7 registered the change. The lockdown protocol engaged on those floors, which meant certain internal doors required a senior badge override to open, which meant that if Derek Callaway attempted to enter the Callaway Systems building and proceed to his desk at that moment, he would be stopped at the 3rd security checkpoint and asked to contact HR. The front desk received an automated notification. The ground floor security lead received a separate one. Standard procedure for a senior override suspension. Hold, flag, await instruction from the authorizing level. The authorizing level was the company founder and CEO. The company founder and CEO was standing in a backyard in June holding a paper plate. Derek's smartwatch buzzed. I watched it happen from 30 feet away, with the full, unhurried attention of someone who has been waiting, in some form, for a long time. I watched him look down at his wrist with the mild, distracted expression of someone expecting a calendar notification. I watched the expression register the message. I watched it register the message again, because he read it twice. The small repeated eye movement that people make when the information does not fit any available category. Active suspension. Badge 4471. Contact HR immediately. He looked up. The yard had not yet caught up to what was happening. His table was still mid-conversation. 2 aunts nearby were still discussing something about a mutual acquaintance's kitchen renovation. My mother was still in position. My father's hand was still resting lightly on my arm. I set it in the register that carries precisely as far as it needs to carry and does not travel past that point. Carol heard it from 2 feet to my left. The 2 tables immediately adjacent heard it clearly. Derek heard every word with perfect and complete clarity. Someone should probably get the imposter out of my office. The silence that followed did not arrive suddenly. It spread outward from that point, the way silence spreads in spaces where people are paying attention but pretending not to, starting at the center, moving in rings, until within 10 or 12 seconds, the entire backyard had arrived at the same quiet, not the dramatic silence of a confrontation. The particular silence of 43 people simultaneously realizing that they have been in the presence of a situation they did not have the complete information about, and that the complete information has just arrived. My father's hand dropped from my arm. My mother said, "What?" in the voice of someone who has heard a word they recognize but cannot place in the current context. Derek said nothing. He was looking at his watch, then at me, then at his watch, then at me. His face was doing something I had never seen it do across 36 years of sharing a family with him. It was searching. Derek's face had always announced and performed and concluded with great efficiency. It had never needed to search. There had never been a moment that did not have a script available, and this was the first one. I put my phone back in my jacket pocket. I set my paper plate down on the table nearest to me. I looked at Derek and waited, with no particular urgency, for whatever came next. The reunion did not end with a confrontation. There was no shouting. There was no dramatic scene that required intervention. What happened was quieter than that, and, I think, more complete than a dramatic scene would have been. It was the kind of ending that is less like a door slamming and more like a window slowly going dark. Derek excused himself from his table and walked to the far end of the yard with his phone already against his ear. I watched him from where I was standing, but I could not hear him. His back was to the yard. His shoulders were pulled slightly inward in the specific posture of a person having a conversation they did not expect to be having. My mother disappeared into the kitchen and did not come back outside for 25 minutes. When she came back, she had the particular, careful, neutral expression of someone who has decided to maintain composure as a strategy. My father stood very still in the middle of the lawn for a long moment, looking at nothing in particular, and then walked to Carol's chair and sat down in the empty lawn chair beside her and did not say anything for a while. The extended family managed it with the collective practical grace of people who have attended enough family gatherings to understand that the appropriate response to something like this is to immediately find a reason to be interested in, something on the other side of the yard. Conversations resumed. Food was refilled. Someone's child needed attention. The mechanics of a family afternoon reasserted themselves over the surface of things, the way water covers stones once you stop disturbing it. Underneath the surface, I could feel the whole yard processing, storing, cataloging what had just happened for later discussion with spouses and siblings and close friends who had not been in attendance. Carol did not say anything for a long time. When she finally turned to look at me, she had the expression I had seen on her face at the science fair and at the graduation, and at every other moment in my life when I had made something, and she had been one of the few people paying full attention. She put her hand on my arm and squeezed it once. That was all. That was sufficient. I stayed for another hour. I helped carry platters back to the kitchen. I spoke at length with two cousins I liked genuinely and had not seen since the last reunion. I ate most of the casserole dish I had brought, which had turned out well. I said goodbye to my parents individually. My mother hugged me with the specific mechanical quality of a gesture being performed from memory rather than from the present moment. My father said drive safe without quite meeting my eyes, which was not unusual and which I have made my peace with. I drove home with the windows down. The evening was warm and the streets were quiet, in the particular way of a Saturday early evening when people are still at whatever afternoon thing they have been doing. I did not turn on the radio. I drove in the quiet and let the warm air come through the windows and thought about nothing in particular, which is something I am rarely able to do and which felt, on that particular drive, like exactly the right thing. Monday morning, I called Priya before she reached the office. I told her that Derek Calloway was my brother and that I wanted the situation handled correctly and cleanly. Priya, who has worked alongside me for 6 years, and who I have come to trust completely with the operational weight of running a 230-person company, received this information in the way she receives all difficult information, without editorializing, without visible reaction, with the full, focused attention of a person who is already thinking about what comes next. She said simply, "Okay, how do you want to proceed?" I said, "Restore his badge today. Schedule a meeting for Wednesday with him, his direct manager, and someone from HR. Make it clear in advance that the meeting is not a performance review, and that his employment is not contingent on his relationship to me. His standing here has nothing to do with who his sister is. If he's doing his job well, he stays. The misrepresentation gets addressed as a professional conduct matter, internal, private, handled by his manager. That's the complete extent of it." Priya said, "Okay." In the brief pause before she ended the call, I heard, very faintly, The smallest possible sound of someone exercising great restraint about something they have, a great deal they would like to say. I appreciated that restraint more than I could have easily explained. Derek kept his job. He is still employed at Callaway Systems. His performance numbers are acceptable. He has not spoken to me directly since the reunion, and I have not sought the conversation. The door is open. I have simply stopped holding it. The week after the reunion, I went back to my regular life. I drove to work. I taught my Tuesday and Thursday sessions at the school. I sat in my usual meetings and reviewed quarterly projections, and had a long conversation with the construction team about the third office timeline, which was running 2 weeks behind due to a permitting delay. The ordinary machinery of a working life continued to operate with its ordinary indifference to the fact that anything significant had happened the previous Saturday. I noticed in the days after the reunion that I felt lighter than I had expected to feel. I had spent some time before running through the possible ways the afternoon might unfold, and most of the scenarios I had imagined left me feeling either drained or hardened in some way. The actual feeling was neither. It was closer to the feeling I have at the end of a very long project. Not triumph and not relief exactly, but a settled completeness. The sense that something has been brought to its natural conclusion and can now be placed in its correct position in the sequence of things that have happened, neither minimized nor inflated, simply present and real and finished. I told James about it over lunch on a Tuesday. James is my first employee, a developer who has worked alongside me since year 2, and who knows the full history of Callaway Systems, and considerably more of my personal history than most people I would call close friends. He listened to the complete account of the backyard without saying much while I was talking. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "You have been carrying that for a long time." I said I supposed I had. He said, "It sounds like it is down now." He finished his sandwich. I thought about that for several days afterward. He was right. Something was down. I had not fully understood how much I had been carrying until it was no longer in my hands, until the weight was gone, and I could feel exactly the shape of the space it had occupied. My father called on a Wednesday evening 12 days after the reunion. It was the first time he had initiated contact between us, in a stretch of time. I had stopped measuring precisely because measuring it had become a kind of weight I did not need to carry. He said, "I didn't know, Maya." I said, "I know, Dad." There was a long pause. My father has never been comfortable in silences he has not arranged. He filled them throughout my childhood with sports results and logistical commentary. This one he sat inside for nearly 10 seconds, which is a very long time on a phone call, and which I recognized, having known this man for 36 years, as an act of effort. He said, "What your mother said, that wasn't right." I said, "No, it wasn't." He said, "I should have said something over the years, not just at the reunion. A lot of times I should have said something, and I didn't." He stopped. Then, "I'm not sure I have a good reason for it." I looked out my apartment window at the street below. A man was walking a dog in the evening light. A delivery truck was double parked 2 buildings down. The ordinary evening world continuing with its ordinary indifferent completeness. I held the phone and thought about what was true, and what was useful and what was needed. And I said, "I know, Dad. I know you should have." And I meant it exactly the way it needed to be meant. Not as an accusation requiring a defense, not as a statement of permanent damage. An acknowledgement of a true thing that both of us now had to hold. He had not said the things he should have said, across many years, in many moments. That was true. He was saying something now, imperfectly and late, and without a good reason to offer for the lateness. That was also true. Those two facts existed together and did not resolve each other, and I was not going to pretend they did, but I was also not going to refuse the fact that he was here, on the phone, on a Wednesday evening 12 days after the backyard, trying. He said, "I'm proud of what you built, Maya. I don't know if I ever told you that the right way." I said, "You didn't, but I'm glad you're telling me now." We talked for another 20 minutes, about nothing in particular, and about everything that mattered, in the sideways, careful way that certain conversations happen between people who are navigating something real and do not quite have the full vocabulary for it yet. It was not a resolution. I am not sure it was even a repair. It was more like a first measurement of the actual distance, which is a necessary thing before any repair can happen. I was glad for it. I am keeping the door open for whatever comes next. Aunt Carol called the following Sunday, as she always does, to ask what I was building. I told her about the third office. I told her about the Wednesday conversation with my father. She listened to all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Your grandmother would have been proud." She meant her mother, my great-grandmother Ruth, who I never knew well enough. She built quietly too, Carol said. That's where you get it from. I had not known that. I have been thinking about it since. My mother has not called. I did not expect her to call quickly, and I have not called her. This is not a punishment, and it is not a cold shoulder, and it is not something I intend to maintain indefinitely. It is simply the natural pause that follows a moment like the one in the backyard, the pause that allows everyone involved to locate themselves accurately in the new version of things before attempting a conversation inside it. I know my mother. I know that what happened in the backyard destabilized a story she has been maintaining for a very long time, and that she will need time to find her footing inside the new one, and that when she does, I will be available to have a real conversation rather than a performed one. The door is open. I am not closing it. I am simply not standing in the doorway waiting anymore. Aunt Carol and I have spoken twice since the reunion, in our usual Sunday rhythm. She asked me on the first call, 2 weeks afterward, whether I was okay. I told her I was more than okay. I told her I was something I had not been in a long time, which was simply unencumbered. She said that was exactly what she had hoped for. She said, "Your great-grandmother would have pressed the button too." I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in what felt like weeks. She said she was serious. I believed her. I am glad she said it. There is a green notebook in the top drawer of my desk at the Callaway Systems main office. The cover has gone soft from 12 years of being picked up and put down and carried in bags and jacket pockets. The spine has been retaped twice. The pages are filled with the full sequential record of building something from nothing. The earliest code sketches that were wrong in ways I did not yet understand how to fix. Structural diagrams that evolved through 6 or 7 iterations before they became the thing they were meant to be. Meeting notes from investor pitches that went nowhere. Notes from the ones that eventually went somewhere. The financial projections from year 3 that I still return to occasionally because I need to remember what continuing looked like from the inside of those 4 months when it was less likely than stopping. There is a folded piece of paper tucked into the back cover. It is Aunt Carol's note. Don't let them make you small. The paper has gone soft, in the fold lines from being unfolded and refolded many times over many years. The ink is starting to ghost where my thumb has touched the same words in the same place across enough repetitions that the contact itself has become a mark. I do not read it every day. I read it when I need to remember what it felt like to be seen before the building was finished, before there was evidence to offer, before any of it was visible to anyone who needed visible things in order to believe. Carol saw the building before it was built. She asked what I was building before there was anything to point at. That kind of attention does not expire. You carry it the way you carry certain things, not in your hands but somewhere deeper, where it stays warm. I brought the notebook to the reunion. I had it in my jacket pocket the entire afternoon. I did not bring it to show anyone or to use as evidence of anything. I brought it because I have learned, across 36 years of being in that family, in that particular configuration, that I sometimes need to have something entirely my own within reach, something that belongs to no narrative anyone else is telling, something that exists completely outside the story being performed at any given table. After I pressed the button, after the yard went quiet in its spreading way, after Derek walked to the far end of the lawn and my mother went inside, and my father stood still in the grass looking at nothing, I put my hand in my jacket pocket. I rested it on the notebook's worn cover for a moment. I did not take it out. I did not need to present it, or explain it, or defend it to anyone. I needed only to know it was there, that the thing I had built was real and solid and belonged entirely to the truth, and that nothing said in any backyard had ever changed that or ever would. People who know what happened have asked me, in various ways, whether I feel bad about pressing it, whether the timing was fair, whether I was performing for the backyard audience the same way Derek was performing, only from the opposite direction. I want to answer that question honestly, because it deserves an honest answer and not a composed one. The button was not revenge. I need to be precise about this. Revenge has a temperature, a specific heat that comes from wanting the other person to hurt in the same register as you hurt. I did not feel that standing in the backyard. What I felt was something much quieter and much more operational, a situation in which a lie was occupying space that belonged to the truth, and I had the specific administrative authority to correct that fact, and I corrected it. The 12 seconds it took was the complete factual account of what I did. The timing was not entirely accidental. I will not pretend otherwise, because pretending otherwise would be a different kind of dishonesty, a performed dignity that claims more composure than was actually present. Something in me, the part that was 11 years old at a dinner table having the science fair redirected toward Derek's new car, the part that heard playing school at a Thanksgiving table in front of the whole family while running a company with 60 employees, the part that had just been told, publicly and with an audience, that she had not become anyone, that part made a choice. It made a choice inside the 12 seconds between my hand going into my pocket and the phone going back into it. I made a deliberate decision about when and where to exercise, something I had every right to exercise at any time. I am at peace with that decision. Being at peace with it does not require pretending it was simple or that it carried no weight. It was not simple. It carried weight. I'm at peace with it anyway. What I pressed was one button. What it represented was 12 years of building in private, running up against its natural perimeter. Those are not the same thing, but they were connected that afternoon in a way that I am not going to perform detachment about. They were connected. I let them be connected, and the connection produced 12 seconds that I do not regret. If you are watching this, and you are the quiet one, the builder in the background, the person in your family whose achievements get minimized or redirected or dissolved into someone else's story, the one who was told, in small repeated ways across many years, that the thing you were making was not impressive enough, not visible enough, not the right kind of something, I want to say something to you directly. You do not owe anyone a louder version of yourself. You do not owe the people who looked past you the comfort of continuing to be looked past. You do not owe the stories that were told about you at dinner tables and in backyards the cooperation of your silence. What you have built is real. Its value does not depend on whether the right audience showed up. The building happened whether or not anyone was watching. It is still standing. And when someone stands in a backyard and tells 43 people that they own what you built, you are allowed to press the button, quietly, calmly, with the full weight of 12 years and the full authority of every early morning that went into the thing you made. You are allowed. There is something I want to say about the company name before I finish, because I think it belongs in this story and I have not said it directly yet. When I was building Callaway systems in that shared workspace at 24 years old, sitting at a small desk on a third floor that smelled like aging carpet, I had a moment about 3 months in where I considered changing the name. Not because I disliked it, because I was aware of everything it carried. Because Callaway was the name of the house on Delwood Drive and the dinner tables and the science fair that got redirected toward Alexis and the graduation dinner and all of the accumulated small redirections across all of the years, I sat with the green notebook open and I thought about it for a long time. And then I closed the notebook and I did not change the name, because the name was mine. Because I had put it on the company, and the company was real, and I was not going to move backward or make myself smaller because of the associations a name carried from somewhere else in my life. The name was going to mean what I made it mean. That was the decision. I have never second-guessed it. Standing in that backyard in June, hearing my brother tell 43 people he owned a company whose name he shares with me by blood and nothing else, I understood something I had not quite put into words before, that the name being on that building downtown was not incidental. It was the answer to something. It was the answer to every moment in that house when the name Callaway was used to mean something smaller than what I was. The building is what the name means now. The building is 12 years and 230 people and a third office under construction. That is what Callaway means. And Derek standing in the backyard cannot change that, and my mother's voice carrying across a yard full of family cannot change that. And nothing said over food at a folding table on a Saturday in June can reach the truth of what is standing downtown with that name in the steel above the door. It is late July as I finish recording this. 6 weeks past the reunion in June. This morning, I drove to the Callaway Systems main office before anyone else arrived. I do this occasionally, less because I need the time there and more because I need the building to be quiet when I enter it, before the day has come in and filled it up with its ordinary, useful noise. I walked through the lobby, past the brushed steel letters, took the elevator to my floor, and sat at my desk with the window behind me, letting in the early light, and the green notebook open on the desk in front of me. I read through the early pages, the sketches that were wrong, the projections from year 3, those numbers I stared at during the 4 months when keeping going was a choice I had to make again every morning. The note in the back of the book, "Don't let them make you small." I looked out the window at the city below. Delivery trucks beginning their routes, the first commuters on the sidewalks, the specific quality of light that belongs to a summer morning before the heat has settled in and changed the color of everything. The world doing what it does, continuous and indifferent and entirely unimpressed by anything any of us are managing, which is something I have always found strangely comforting. I thought about my father on the phone on a Wednesday evening, trying to find the words for something he has not had words for before. I thought about the door I am keeping open for him, and for Derek, and even for my mother, not as an obligation that goodness requires of me, but as a choice I am making, because I am not the kind of person who closes things in anger. I close things when they are finished. That is different. The door is open. I am simply not standing at it anymore. I thought about the 7-year-old on the kitchen floor with the broken clock radio, drawing her diagrams in the spiral notebook, certain that if she stayed with it long enough, she would understand it completely enough to make it work again. She was right. She was always right about that. She just had to grow up in a house that did not yet have the language to tell her so, and she had to carry that absence quietly for a long time before the words caught up with what she had already built. I have been asked, more than once, in the weeks since the reunion, whether I plan to eventually tell my mother what I have built. Whether there will be a formal conversation, a sitting down, a full accounting of the 12 years, and the building, and the name above the door. I do not have a clean answer to that question. I know that the information is available to her if she looks for it. The company is not hidden. My name is on the website and on the building and on the incorporation documents that are public record. She can find it whenever she is ready to find it. Whether she is ever ready to find it is a question I have decided not to hold for her. That is her work to do, not mine. My work has been and continues to be the thing I have always done. Build real things in the time I have, show up consistently, stay with the problems until they resolve, and keep the door open for the people I love, even when the door has been difficult. That is the complete job description. I have been doing it for 36 years. That is my story. I still live in the 1-bedroom apartment. I still drive the Honda with the dented bumper that I will get around to fixing eventually. I still teach at the elementary school 2 mornings a week, because I cannot leave the moment when a child makes a machine do something new for the first time, and I will not pretend that I am close to leaving it. I have a company that carries my last name on a building in this city, and a green notebook in my desk drawer, and a worn note in the back of it that I have read enough times that the fold lines are going soft. The name on that building is Callaway. It was my family's name, before it was mine. I kept it because I decided a long time ago that I was not going to let the complexity of belonging to a family that could not fully see me cause me to make myself smaller, or to move backward, or to give anything away. I built something real inside that name. It is standing. I am not moving out. If you are watching this and someone has been telling you your whole life that you have not yet become someone, I want you to hold the possibility that you have been becoming someone this entire time, that the building has been in progress all along, that the thing you have been quietly making in the hours when no one was watching is more real and more solid and more completely yours than anything the loudest voices in any room have ever managed to perform. My great-grandmother Ruth, a woman my Aunt Carol told me about on a Sunday phone call last week, used to say that the quietest rivers run the deepest. I did not know her well enough when she was alive. I understand her better now than I ever did when I could have asked her to explain it. Run deep, build real, And when the moment comes and someone is standing in a backyard telling 43 people that they own what you made in 12 years of 4 in the morning mornings and investor no's and year 3, near failures. And one very important note in the back of a green notebook, press the button. You have every right to press the button. That is all of it. That is the complete story. Thank you for staying until the end. If you are rooting for the quiet builders, the ones working in the background who never needed an audience to know that the work was worth doing, hit the like button. If you believe that the truth asserts itself eventually, regardless of how many years of backyard stories get built around it, subscribe. And if you have lived something like this, if you are the one in your family, or your workplace, or your life who turned out to be holding the keys to the building, share it in the comments. I read every single one. There is another story waiting for you in the description below. I chose it because I think you will understand immediately why I chose it. See you next time.